Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Helena Warrior. Coming up tonight, Chancellor Rishi Sunak returns to the Commons to unveil a new £15 billion emergency measures to support households through the cost of living crisis, including a U-turn to hit oil and gas giants with a windfall tax. Acting Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Stephen House, defends the police investigation into lockdown rule-breaking in Downing Street, saying they policed without fear or favour after more Conservative MPs urge Boris Johnson to resign. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, famous faces head across the UK to see new arts, sports and environmental initiatives supported by the National Lottery. Singer Rachel Stevens visits one of the capital's communities who secured the funding. And reflecting on her childhood in London and her passion for the history of the suffragette movement, we'll be hearing from the author Siobhan McGowan about her new book, The Trial of Lotte Ray. First tonight, though, after pressure from opposition parties, Chancellor Rishi Sunak has announced a package to help households cope with the cost of living. In a government U-turn, a £5 billion windfall tax will be levied on oil and gas giants, with a new investment allowance to incentivise the reinvestment of profits. While other emergency measures announced included a one-off £300 payment for pensioners and a one-off payment of £650 for around 8 million of the lowest income households.
Our energy profits levy will encourage investment, not deter it. It raises around £5 billion of revenue over the next year so that we can help families with the cost of living, and it avoids having to increase our debt burden further. Because there is nothing noble in burdening future generations with ever more debt today, because politicians of the day were too weak to make the tough decisions. First, people on the lowest incomes. Over 8 million households already have incomes low enough for the state to be supporting their cost of living through the welfare system. They could be temporarily unemployed and looking for work, unable to work because of long-term sickness or disability, or on low pay and using benefits to top up their wages. Right now, they face incredibly difficult choices. So I can announce today we will send directly to around 8 million of the lowest income households a one-off cost of living payment of £650.
Well, following the announcement, the Labour Party accused the government of dither and delay, claiming the statement came too far into the crisis. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves asked what took the government so long, stating it was Labour who first highlighted the measures in Mr Sunak's plan, including the windfall tax.
For months, it has been clear that more was necessary to help people bring their bills down. So what took this government so long? Every day that they have refused to act, £53 million more added to Britain's household bills during this cost of living crisis. This government's dither and delay has cost our country dearly. On this side of the House, we welcome the fact that the government is finally acting on our calls to introduce a windfall tax.
Absolutely. Our call.
There we are, that was Rachel Reeves. Well, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, tweeted his response to the Chancellor's emergency measures earlier, saying it's right that the government is finally taking some steps to address the spiralling cost of living, which is having a devastating impact on the lives of many Londoners, particularly the poorest households. But today is a missed opportunity, as the measures do not go far enough. If the government is truly serious about tackling the cost of living crisis, it must immediately give me the powers to freeze private rents in London, reverse the damaging cuts to universal credit, and increase this vital benefit in line with inflation. Well, the timing of the Chancellor's announcement has been called into question, with claims of deflection from the full Sue Gray report into rule-breaking in Downing Street, which was released yesterday. The 60-page report detailed events which included drinking, karaoke and abuse of security and cleaning staff at a time when millions of people across the country were unable to see family or friends. Well, today, 3 further Conservative MPs have demanded Boris Johnson's resignation resignation, including MPs David Simmons and John Barron, adding their names to the growing discontentment towards the Prime Minister. Well, at the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee today, Acting Commissioner Sir Stephen House said officers acted with integrity over the lockdown party inquiry and made decisions based upon facts.
Was involved in these decision makings myself, that I am very confident of the integrity of the decisions that were made in this investigation, which was a difficult investigation. I would like to pay tribute publicly to the officers who were involved in this investigation. And I would point out to members here, and I'm not trying to score silly points here, genuinely, I think the last time I was here, I gave enough evidence that I'm not that worried about what a politician thinks of my views.
Agreed.
I'm not particularly concerned about what the Prime Minister thinks. I do my job without fear or favour, as did the Met in this situation.
There we are. That was Metropolitan Police Acting Commissioner Sir Stephen House. Now, a charity is offering a reward for information about who shot a black equal rights campaigner a year ago. Crime Stoppers will pay up to £20,000 to anyone who shares information anonymously, leading to the conviction of those responsible for Sasha Johnson's shooting. Miss Johnson was shot in the head at close range while at a silent disco in the garden of a house on Consort Road in Peckham, South London, on May 23rd last year. The mother of two survived, but she now requires constant medical care and has speech and mobility issues. A Metropolitan Police officer is set to go on trial next year, accused of causing grievous bodily harm to a man who was left paralysed following a pursuit in North London. 25-year-old Jordan Walker-Brown fell from a wall after being hit with a taser in Haringey in May 2020. He was left paralysed from the chest down and has been told by doctors he will never walk again. Imran Mahmood denied the charge of GBH at Southwark Crown Court today and has been released on bail. Piccadilly line trains will be stopping at South Kensington Station again from the 1st of June. Transport for London have announced that essential work to replace the 5 escalators serving the Piccadilly line at South Ken is near completion and will be reopening ahead of the Platinum Jubilee bank holiday. The escalator replacement work started in February 2021 after they became the highest priority escalators for replacement on the tube network, having been installed in 1973. Well, also in Tube Network news, a formal investigation has been launched by TfL after an issue with the wheels on the tube trains forced the entire Metropolitan line fleet to be checked. Last month, urgent safety checks were carried out after engineers identified a fault with some of the wheels, leading to a special timetable until the problems were then fixed. The root cause of the issue will now be identified in the formal investigation. Now, public artworks are to be displayed throughout stations on the brand new Elizabeth line by acclaimed British and international artists, including Turner Prize winner Richard Wright. The artworks are tributes to their local areas and communities, building on a long history of putting art at the centre of the capital's transport system to enhance the passenger experience. Right, time for a check on London's weather now. It's staying warm and dry overnight with average temperatures of 13. Friday will see a dry morning with some sunny intervals throughout the day, with highs of 21 degrees. Looking ahead to the weekend, Saturday is expected to be dry with the sun just peeking out from behind those clouds occasionally. Temperatures a little lower at 19 degrees. Sunday is even cooler, light clouds with temperatures dropping to around 14 degrees. Well, just before the break, let's bring you this. The national treasure, Dippy the Diplodocus, is back at the Natural History Museum for a short spell before heading to a new temporary base. It will be back on display until December, after which a new host will be chosen for a long-term loan in 2023. Well, Dippy attracted over 2 million views while on a UK tour after it was dismantled from the museum in 2017 after 112 years. Right, it's time for a break now, but when we come back, Matt Withers will be here to run us through the stories making headlines in the local papers, including a Wimbledon school teacher who broke a rapping world record.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Time now for our weekly look at some local news stories affecting those in the capital. Well, London Live's paper reviewer Matt Withers is here to go through these papers, and let's start with these Grenfell residents who have been searching for a new home as they currently live close to 3 fire stations.
Yeah, this is from the South London Press. It's headline: couple who escaped Grenfell blaze offered new flat on the 10th floor. But as you say, there's two issues at play here. This is a woman who escaped the Grenfell Tower fire. She's been stuck for years in a flat where she can't open the windows because, as you say, she's got 3 fire stations nearby, and the sound of fire engines is understandably very triggering for her. This is Emma Louise O'Connor. She has got post-traumatic stress disorder. They moved into a flat in Kensington 4 years ago, and they've been battling to be rehoused by Kensington and Chelsea Council ever since. She says, I've got severe PTSD, which is set off by sirens. It's even worse when the fire engines go past. I can't open any windows. It just sets me off in a panic attack. She says you can hear these sirens going off between 5 and 20 times a day, and she struggles to leave the flat. She also says that one of the places that she was offered was on the 10th floor of a housing block, which was also very upsetting. She said what the council could do is put Grenfell residents in a completely different category and stop putting unacceptable properties up. I'm not going to go anywhere above a ground floor or basement flat. How insensitive do you have to be? And people, I suspect, would sympathise with the situation she finds herself in.
Absolutely. Well, has Kensington and Chelsea Council said anything about her requests then?
Yes, they have. They've issued a statement worth hearing in full. They said the council spent more than £200 million to secure more than 300 homes, and we've supported 198 households into a home of their own. All of the remaining households from Grenfell Tower and the Walk are in private rented accommodation of their choosing. We are continuing to support the remaining households to find a home they can settle in. Some will choose to move again, and we have a policy in place to assist with that. We continue to work with all these households at their own pace.
OK, all right. Well, let's move on then to an investigation into an incident in northwest London where a man was handcuffed by the Met Police after a dispute with a traffic warden.
Yeah, it's quite an odd one. This is one of those, you're not really sure what's happened, although some video exists. It's from the Camden New Journal, and actually it's about Scotland Yard opening investigation after a Gospel Oak man claims to have been aggressively arrested by police over a dispute with a traffic warden. It's a gentleman called Dre Wilkins. He had police called on him by parking attendants outside his house after he believed that they'd wrongly given him a ticket, and he'd asked which warden had issued this. It looks like it turned into a bit of an argument. Officers arrived. He was put in handcuffs for 10 to 15 minutes. He said he had his thumb twisted. He feared that his shoulder was going to be dislocated, and the reporter here did say that bruises could still be seen on his wrist. Now, police left the scene without further action being taken or any apologies. It says that the Professional Standards Unit is investigating, although when you actually look at the quotes from the Met further down, it looks like it's pretty much been closed.
Right, so there is an investigation into it. Is it seeming that this is a race-related incident?
No, and to be fair, he's not claiming this himself. He came from the UK, from Jamaica, aged 8, but he said at the time, I didn't think it was to do with race. I don't put that into any equation generally, and I didn't think of it that way. So he's not making that accusation.
So no action has been taken against the officers involved?
No, what the Met has said is that they're aware of the footage, which was taken by a neighbour on their phone, but it only shows a small part of the incident. No actions have been taken against officers. They say a decision was taken to de-arrest the man, and there will be no further police action in relation to this aspect.
Right, OK, well, we shall keep an eye on that. Let's move on then to a school in the capital, which has got the highest possible Ofsted rating in all areas. Quite remarkable, really.
It is. It's also got the longest days, which is what stands out here. It's from the Newham Recorder. It's a school which has 9-hour days, praised as outstanding. This is a girls' school, a Muslim girls' school at our academy in Newham. The lessons go on from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. 4 days a week, and they finish at 12:15 on Friday. So if you do the maths, even with that early dart on a Friday, that is still hugely in excess of what most schools are doing. But it does seem to have paid off, because Ofsted has said it's got a fantastic school culture that helped its students to achieve academic success, and inspectors gave the school the highest possible rating in all areas. So it gives you a good start in life. You're just going to have to put the hours in.
So what is it then that the teachers or the school say makes the school so special?
Well, the executive head teacher, Rukhsana Adam, talks about the school's values being key to its success. She said the teaching of British values is important to us. These values include democracy, rule of law, but as a school with a Muslim ethos, each of these values are not just British, but principles that Islam teaches. So a lot of stress there on the values of the school. Also, you have to say they've probably got a lot of resources as well, because it's an independent school and the fees are £3,100 a year. So they probably also have very good books and computers.
Absolutely. Right, well, finally, let's move on to this. An absolutely great headline. Wimbledon school teacher breaks rapping world record.
Yeah, this is the Wimbledon Times. This is, well, it's true. He rapped for almost 40 hours. He says he feels proud and relieved. It's Daniel Alcon. He's 35. He performs under his musical alias D. Alcon, or Dalcon, I guess. He skipped sleep for 2 nights to rap consecutively for 39 hours and 37 minutes. But what is brilliant about this story is that he's had to do this twice. He's attempted it once before, attempting to beat the 33.5 hours already set by an American rapper called Watsky. He rapped for 35 hours, only to discover that in the interim he'd already been beaten by Irishman Liam Reeves, and it was now 36 hours. So he had to do the whole thing again, including asking his friends who were acting as witnesses to sit there and listen to him rap for another 40 hours.
Absolutely
but at least he's got his record.
I wonder, so what are the rules? So is he allowed to eat? Is he allowed to drink? Because skipping sleep for 2 days, that's quite intense.
Yeah, you don't have to continuously rap. It's not kind of like Scatman John. He's allowed 30 seconds to catch his breath between raps. The beats have to be continuous, and you get a 5-minute break for every hour rapped. He says, I just survived on kiwi fruit, grapes and tea. I had my kettle there with me and I drank loads of tea. More often than not, you'll see me sticking the kettle on. I'm a big tea drinker, and I can think of nothing more hip-hop than that.
And absolutely nothing more British, is there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, well, Matt Withers, thank you so much for joining us here on London Live News to run through those local papers. There we are, that was Matt Withers. Now, to mark the Jubilee year, the National Lottery is providing over £22 million to communities across the UK. Funding has been given across arts, sports and environmental initiatives who have galvanised their local community whilst leaving a legacy in the name of the Jubilee. Well, the singer Rachel Stevens went to Kensal House to see one of these community initiatives in action.
I'm here at the Spid Theatre Company, and it's been so lovely hearing about all the projects that they've been working on, and also hearing how the funding from the National Lottery is helping bring the community together, how it's going to make long-lasting changes in the community, and how they're celebrating the Jubilee. So it's been really lovely to hear their stories.
We shake out our limbs.
So the Spid Theatre Company is an award-winning youth charity that specialises in theatre on council estates. And they've been telling me all about the projects they've been working on and how they're going to be celebrating the Jubilee and the build-up to the anniversary of Grenfell.
SPID stands for Social, Progressive, Interconnected, Diverse. We do high-quality community theatre on council estates. We make art that advocates housing justice, and we work with young people. So we're so grateful to the lottery because their funding has allowed us to really scale up our free programme of drama and heritage activities. And it means that we can share the stories of people living in social housing and really celebrate why those estates matter. So aside from the investment in the free activities we do and the creation of these stories that we'll be sharing in June, we also have funding from the lottery for our refurbishment, and that's really exciting. The space that SPID is based in, where I'm standing today, is extremely dilapidated and run down, and because of the funding from people like the lottery, we're going to install a lift, we're going to fix all of the leaks, we're going to equip the space, we're going to have full disabled access, and those works are starting in June, so we're really looking forward to that. It's a real time of hope.
I'm Roman, lovely to meet you.
As good as can be expected at 91.
Oh my word! Today I'm here at Agewell East to come and see all of the wonderful things that the National Lottery has been doing to help that community fund, including things like the Knitter Natter, which I'm very intrigued about. Also planting and making some wonderful Jubilee flower beds.
What's your favourite song
To play on the radio, my favourite songs.
see all the roots
I mean, to be fair, the Harry Styles stuff at the minute is very good. Yeah, he's good fun, mate. That's it. That's it. It is incredible to see that £4.5 million comes from, you know, the National Lottery's Community Fund to places like this, like Agewell, and that money then gets put into £49,000 that they can use and put on wicked events so that everyone can maintain that community.
What are you doing? I wanted to be able to see, what everyone gets up to, what everyone's been doing. I wanted to see, you know, where all this wonderful funding kind of goes, and seeing what fun activities you guys do here with the people.
Bradley's chicken.
I like that. Your favourite word is chicken wing.
Chicken wing, chicken macaroni.
You're watching London Live News with Helena Wadia. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, the charity looking to boost the visibility of women in science with an event in the capital featuring some of the most accomplished scientists from London and beyond.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. A reminder of our top story. Chancellor Rishi Sunak has announced a package to help households cope with the cost of living. In a government U-turn, a £5 billion windfall tax will be levied on oil and gas giants, with a new investment allowance to incentivise the reinvestment of profits. While other emergency measures included a one-off £300 payment for pensioners and a one-off payment of £650 for around 8 million of the lowest income households.
Our energy profits levy will encourage investment, not deter it. It raises around £5 billion of revenue over the next year so that we can help families with the cost of living, and it avoids having to increase our debt burden further. Because there is nothing noble in burdening future generations with ever more debt today, because politicians of the day were too weak to make the tough decisions. First, people on the lowest incomes. Over 8 million households already have incomes low enough for the state to be supporting their cost of living through the welfare system. They could be temporarily unemployed and looking for work, unable to work because of long-term sickness or disability, or on low pay and using benefits to top up their wages. Right now, they face incredibly difficult choices. So I can announce today, we will send directly to around 8 million of the lowest income households a one-off cost of living payment of £650.
Well, following the announcement, the Labour Party accused the government of dither and delay, claiming the statement came too far into the crisis. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves asked what took the government so long, stating it was Labour who first highlighted the measures in Mr Sunak's plan, including the windfall tax.
For months, it has been clear that more was necessary to help people bring their bills down. So what took this government so long? Every day that they have refused to act, £53 million more added to Britain's household bills during this cost of living crisis. This government's dither and delay has cost our country dearly. On this side of the House, we welcome the fact that the government is finally acting on our calls to introduce a windfall tax.
Absolutely. Our call.
And it's good to see the SNP U-turning today too and saying that they also are in favour of a windfall tax.
Now, a charity are looking to boost the visibility of women and non-binary people in science after research showed women only account for 1 in 4 graduating from university in a STEM subject. Soapbox Science is hosting an event in the capital which will aim to display science, technology, engineering and mathematics as achievable careers for young women. Well, I spoke to the co-founder, Dr. Natalie Pettorelli, who's a conservation biologist at the Zoological Society of London, a little earlier to find out more about the charity.
So Soapbox Science is a grassroots science communication initiative that helps and that wants to bring science to the masses, basically engage people with science, showing them that it's relevant to their everyday life. But the twist in it is that we use that opportunity to also showcase a number of scientists that are not what the people expect, in this case, that are women. So basically going into places where people don't expect to see scientists, you know, whether it's busy streets or shopping centers, and then engage them about the science that they do while showing that anyone can be a scientist.
Wonderful. Well, this figure has been revealed that the number of women graduating in core STEM subjects is 1 in 4. And that's the same number of women as it was in 2015. Does that figure concern you?
It does, because we created Soapbox Science in 2011 and it was still the same figure. So clearly something's not working in terms of showing that science is a career for women and young girls. And so I think there's been a lot of improvement in terms of engaging and showing, displaying a number of role models, but we're still not talking about women in curriculum in school. We are still not seeing as many women on screen talking about science as men. So there's still a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. You mentioned a lot about visibility and showing people what a scientist looks like. What do you think of the stereotypes that perhaps put women or young girls off from going into these STEM subjects?
So when I was a girl, so quite some years ago, the only scientist, a woman scientist that would have been talked about at school was Marie Curie. And 30 years later, it's exactly the same. This idea that there's very few women that contributed to generating scientific knowledge, this idea that most scientists are white male, a bit nerdy and quite boring, is a completely out of touch with what science is about. Science is not just about being good in one thing and some kind of genius type of stereotype. It's about being able to collaborate with people, to communicate with people, to engage people, to find solutions, to bring people together, to connect the dots. So it's a lot about creativity, about inspiration, about innovation. And these are sectors that should appeal to women. So if they don't, there's clearly a problem about communicating about what a career in science is about.
Absolutely. Well, listen, there's an event on Saturday, the London Soapbox Science event. Tell us what will happen and who will be there and what we can expect if you go down.
So if you're walking nearby the South Bank, you can expect between 2 and 5 p.m. a bunch of women on soapboxes talking about all kind of science. And they will look, whether it's young scientists to much more senior ones. You might expect talking about, some of the one that I'm really looking forward to see is one about making diamonds out of thin air. There's something about the relationship between your tummy and your mood, as of how what you eat influence your emotions. There's something about wasp. There's been just a book release on the importance of wasp, and actually one of the scientists working on wasp will be there talking about why they are much more than an annoyance. You can also expect people talking about magnetic imagery and virtual human, so how you use models and simulation to try to improve human health. So a bunch of topics, hopefully for everyone. What's important, it's free. You don't have to stay if you're bored, but you can stay as long as you want if you're interested.
Absolutely. Well, over the pandemic, we also saw that women have been pivotal to vaccine development. Is that something that, you'll be using to try and kind of spearhead women into STEM?
I think that too many times we label scientists as in a white coat in a lab. I'm a scientist. I don't wear a lab coat. I'm not in a lab. I was actually a disaster in a lab. But I work outside. I'm a biologist. I'm a conservation biologist. STEM is, there's a multitude of career. And what we really want to show is that it's not just about one type of science. There's a lot of different science, and trying to get the kids so that the kids that loves to run around outside is as inspired as the one that likes to work with tubes and pipettes, which is the same as the one that really likes technology. We want to show that there's not just one type of scientist. There's a lot of different types of scientists.
Absolutely. Well, just finally, I'm sure you heard that recently the government's Social Mobility Commissioner, Catherine Burblesing, she said that some girls don't choose physics A-level because there's a lot of hard maths in there that I think they would rather not do. What do you feel about that statement? Because I do know that there was a lot of anger from some leading scientists about that statement.
Yeah, I feel very aggrieved. I mean, pulling all women and girls together by saying that math is not for them, it's just such a stereotypical, it's an aggression to anyone. So if I love math, am I less of a woman? Men and women have the same diverse interests. The question is how we nurture them, how we give them role models that inspire them, how we build their confidence to go in all kind of sectors. The more we pass on the stereotypes, the less we attract a diversity of talent, and that matters. Because right now we have a bunch of challenges to fix, from climate change to food security to all kinds to epidemics. So we do need that diversity of talent. We can't afford not to attract the best people, and the best people are not white male. They come in all kinds, shape and form. So we do need to get them on board. So those stereotypes are really not helpful.
Well, that was Dr. Natalie Pettorelli there, and the London Soapbox Science event is taking place on Saturday on the South Bank. Time for a final break now, but when we come back, England captain Harry Kane's World Cup Golden Boot is on display at the Barbican, alongside other memorabilia from the Tottenham striker. We'll be visiting the exhibition.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of London Live News. Now, England captain Harry Kane's World Cup Golden Boot is now on display. Harry Kane, I Want to Play Football is the name of the exhibition, as one of the items shows his desire to become a footballer at the age of 5. Well, the collection at the Museum of London hosts some of the Tottenham striker's most prized memorabilia, including his debut Spurs shirt and an array of his most important England shirts. Well, we went down to the exhibition to check it out.
So it's about Harry growing up in London as a local London lad. A story from him coming through grassroots is really important. So the beginning of the display will show all that. So he played at Ridgeway Rovers, Gladstone Rangers, and then when he did sign that Spurs contract at 17, professional contract, then he did go out on loan. So we do touch upon Leyton Orient, Millwall, and of course, because we are the Museum of London and we focus on London people and places, you know, Millwall, it was a time where because they were in a relegation battle, he saw, you know, this is people, it's their careers, it's their livelihood, it's their families. He saw how that impacted people as a youngster. So that was a major growth for him. And then he looks back fondly on Leyton Orient as well. I mean, he's originally from Leytonstone. He went on loan there, and you'll see as well in the display that he now sponsors them. So he does give back. So he's sort of gone 360 in that, and he knows this is a position where we can help now as well, which is really exciting. There's a massive Spurs section because that's the larger part of his senior career. It literally starts from his first sort of debut game right through to his hat-trick. So there's a lot there. So what you'll see in the display is his numbers from 37, 18 to 10. So he didn't just come in at Spurs and become a number 10. He sort of worked his way through. And even going out on loan and coming back, you know, he had to prove himself. And then he had to try and get that striker spot ahead of already established players like Soldado and Adebayor. So it wasn't easy. He had to obviously try hard to get his place, find his place. But it's really interesting because where we start with his youth, there's actually a trophy that he has as a youngster that's the top goal scorer at Waltham Forest District. And then not too far from that case, we've got his golden boots. So we've got 3 golden boots in the Playmaker Awards. So I think that's a really beautiful contrast from when he was young to now. So that's a really beautiful moment. So it's something that he's wanted to do since he was young, and he strives to do that. And you can see that through his journey and sort of trophies and things that he's picked up. He played at every England youth level. And then we've got his debut shirt for England where he scored within 79 seconds of coming onto the pitch. He was substituted for Wayne Rooney on that game as well. So that's a great story. It's a great first debut. And then we have his shirt that he played against Scotland in, where he became captain for the first time. And then we have a shirt from the 2018 World Cup, so where we got the hat-trick against Panama, and then the Denmark v England shirt for the Euro 2020. So we've sort of done it chronologically up to date up until last year. But also we focus on him as England captain, but also his team. This England team is very different in that they're connecting with the next generation of fans, this generation of fans, and they're really, it's allyship in a way that I've never seen before, and I think we've never seen before. They're not afraid to stand together, they're not afraid to speak out for things like LGBTQ, standing in solidarity, and then Black Lives Matter and taking the knee. So there's a lot going on there, a very inspirational team, and obviously Harry is the England captain. We have the World Cup Golden Boot on display, and it is he is the only second Englishman to obtain that honour. So it's great to have that on display here. I mean, it's not something you see every day, and we've got it in the case here along with the hat-trick ball from the Panama game. So I know people will be really excited to see that. Everything that you see in the exhibition is on loan from Harry Kane and his family, so nothing's been seen in public before. So it's the first time you'll get to see all these objects. So there's nothing here that belongs to anyone else, apart from the Pride armband actually that he gave to Matt Lucas. So Matt Lucas has loaned that to us. that he wore on the Germany game. But these are items that you will never see before, and it's really important that the display itself is free as well. It's really accessible, so entry to the museum's free and the display's free. We're open to the public, and it's our duty as the Museum of London to celebrate London and its people. And Harry's story is a beautiful story of just putting aside the football. It's a young boy that grew up in London that wanted to do something, and in his case it was he wanted to play football, and he knew that from like 5 years old. We have some schoolwork from his primary school that says I want to play football, so he was very clear on what he wanted to do, and as he was growing back he kept getting knockbacks. It wasn't an easy ride, you know. He was told he doesn't look like a striker, and told over and over again that, you know, you're not going to make it. So it was just that belief and that determination he had in himself to keep going. And I think that will really connect with people, youngsters, and, you know, not just youngsters, just people in general, that, you know, if you do want something so bad, like, you can sort of make it happen, so, like, believe you can make it happen. So I'm hoping that will connect with people, and that's the story. It's ultimately a child that wanted to play football, local London lad that became England captain. It's possible.
There we are, that exhibition is open to the public until December. Now, reflecting on her childhood in London and her passion for the history of the suffragette movement, author Siobhan McGowan has released a new book interweaving fact and fiction. The trial of Lotta Ray follows a young woman who is attacked by a wealthy barrister and the consequences of her brave decision to take him to court. Well, Tanya has been speaking to Siobhan about the book and her time growing up here in the capital.
It's set at the turn of the 20th century, and during the suffragette movement, the rise of the suffragette movement and the impending World War. And it centres on a young woman, Lotta Ray, who's a working woman at the Whitbread Brewery in Chiswell Street. And there she meets her nemesis, a wealthy gentleman who rapes her. And she makes the brave decision to take that case to court, and she becomes the centre of a notorious Old Bailey trial. And it's really, it goes over the next 12 years and what happens, the fate of what happens to the players in that trial, and the long-term reaching and quite devastating consequences of what happens to a couple of players in that trial. Well, the story is based on imagination, but the locations, like when I went to school, I used to live in the Barbican when it was under construction in the early 70s. And I used to walk up Chiswell Street where the Whitbread Brewery is. And I used to see the old white dray horses with the carts and barrels, and I could smell the hops. So it was very much like it had been right up until the early 70s, as it would have been in Lotta's day. And that always stayed with me. And I used to go to school in Whitecross Street where she lunches with her beau and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of it was inspired by London sites. And then in Soho, she goes to Soho at some stage, and I spent a lot of time there in my teenage times in Soho and King's Cross as well. So a lot of the locations are inspired by real life. Yeah.
We marked 100 years of the suffragette movement just before the pandemic, and it was celebrated widely. Did that kind of inspire you or remind you of how much you wanted to write a book about it?
No, I was inspired by it anyway before that. I've always been fascinated by the early 20th century, the turn of the earliest 20th century, because it was a time of such great hope and promise. So women were finding their voice, and there were scientific advances, and it was the start of a new century, like we had our millennium. And then all the hope, all the bells of St. Paul's ringing out for all the hope, and then destroyed by this huge, dark First World War, like everything vanquished, you know, and stole and damned a whole generation. So I was always fascinated by that.
Let's talk about your brother, because he was in very much on the scene in the 80s and started the punk rock band Pogues in King's Cross around that time. How close, were you and your brother growing up? Does he feature in the book, or that music scene, does that feature in the book?
the King's Cross days, yeah, I set it in King's Cross because we had so many times in King's Cross. When they were starting the bands in the early 80s, Pogue Mahone, I was very much involved in that. I used to do their posters and flyers for the Hope and Anchor and the Bull and Gate and the WAG Club in Soho. And we were all penniless, and we all used to go out. We'd be down by King's Cross Station, which in those days, King's Cross, I think, is gentrified now, but in those days, it was very seedy, very run down. There was a lot of the, women of the night down there. So I used to watch them in Soho, and there was some Lotta in that as well. Some of the story where it goes in the book. And we used to sing to passers-by. We used to serenade them with Peggy Gordon, the song Peggy Gordon. And they were great days. So I always, in the book, I kind of talk about the smoky, dirty streets of King's Cross. And that's what I'm remembering myself. That's what I'm remembering from those early 80s days.
What was your aim in writing a book like this? Was it something that you'd always wanted to do? Did you want to capture memories on paper so that they last forever, or leave some sort of legacy?
I love the sense of place of London. I wanted to capture London and some of the feeling, the way I felt about London on paper. I wanted to capture the spirit of the time.
Well, that book, The Trial of Lotta Ray, is out now. Now, time for a final check on the weather. It's staying warm and dry overnight with average temperatures of 13. Friday will see a dry morning with some sunny intervals throughout the day with highs of a lovely 21 degrees. Looking ahead to the weekend, Saturday is expected to be dry with the sun peeking out from behind the clouds occasionally. Temperatures a little lower at 19 degrees. Sunday is even cooler, light cloud with temperatures dropping to 14 degrees. Well, that's it from us tonight. Thanks for watching the show, and we'll be back with more news from across London at 6 p.m. tomorrow. See you then.